so many people come back to like, well, I didn't major in this. I'll hear 45-year-old people, and I'm like, are you kidding me? That was 25 years ago. It's
Yeah.
okay. Think of all the
Yeah.
learning you've had since. You're
Absolutely.
much greater than you maybe are giving yourself credit for. You for
Yeah.
sure are greater than you're giving yourself credit for. But we have these mental blocks based on messages we've received from all over the place that are really silly.
Welcome to the In Between, a space for anyone navigating from the familiar to the unknown. Whether you're facing a personal, professional, or spiritual disruption, these conversations are here to help guide you through the questions, uncertainties, and opportunities that come with change. Hear from leaders, thinkers, and storytellers who found their way forward, and learn how you can too. No matter where you're starting, you don't have to navigate this alone. Today I'm sitting down with Betsy Wills, co-founder of UScience, and Alex Ellison, and together they have co-authored Your Hidden Genius, the science-based strategy to uncovering and harnessing your innate talents. Betsy and Alex have spent years studying how and why people can end up in the wrong careers and how to fix it. So Betsy and Alex, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I am excited to have this conversation. Can you guys share a little bit about what led you to co-author this book together?
I'm going to let Betsy take that. She's got a good
Sure.
story.
The story goes way back, but I'm going to just rush towards the pandemic. Um, I had co-founded UScience, which has really changed the game for career guidance, mainly focused on high school and college students. We brought a very old assessment, time-tested, science-backed, that started in the 1920s into an online environment. The assessment was $750 to take it, and we brought that self-same assessment to everyone. And I'd always known that I wanted more adults to have access to it. And so in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I had this concept of writing a book, and I contacted Alex because she had already written a small book on the topic and said, let's co-author something.
Love that. So did you guys know each other previously, or you just were aware that you were both interested in this same tool?
We were
We'd only
just,
met a couple years prior to the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, I run a college and career counseling practice, and so had been using UScience, and I was an evangelist sort of for the power of the tool, and started requiring it actually of all of my new clients. It was like the number one intake step, and so was a big fan of it, and so we connected over that. And then during the pandemic was when we got together and said, hey, this needs to be brought to everyone, and made more accessible.
Yes, so I heard you guys on the Typology podcast, and when I did, because of the topic that my podcast focuses around, on helping people that are in transition or in that in between space where maybe they've, the past is no longer really viable or an option, but the future is a little unclear and uncertain, and sometimes I think one of the best ways to start figuring out what the future could look like is starting by understanding yourself. And I love assessments as a tool to help do that work. And so when I heard your guys' conversation on that podcast, I was like, oh man, I would love to have a conversation with the two of you as well. So on that, what is it that causes people to feel stuck in a career that maybe is no longer working or maybe never really worked in the first place?
Well, I'll take that one. I mean, I think, Betsy and I talk a lot about this, especially we what started the conversation actually around the book was the Great Resignation around COVID, right? And so everyone was in great numbers rethinking their work, and it was this real, changing tide in the career landscape. And I think COVID just revealed very quickly and urgently what had already been going on for several years, which is that the nature of work had been changing. Technology was already starting to replace certain careers, but also create new ones. And I think what we realized is people were just sort of letting the changing tides pull them this way and that way. And they didn't really have any kind of anchor or compass. And it's really tempting to just sort of like go where the money is, right? And just sort of like follow the trends of what we're seeing in the news or on social media. But if you don't really know what your true innate talents are, if you don't take stock of those, you're just going to be whipped around in every storm. And so we really are believers in like sit down, take a minute, take a breath, take inventory of your natural innate talents. We even say like there's really four, the core four we call them, that you really need to know for every career, what they are for you personally. And then you have this wonderful, like, I guess I'll use the metaphor of a paddle, in your boat that's bouncing around at sea. And it will really give you a lot of assurance wherever the market goes, wherever your spouse moves, for a job, or wherever, AI takes us, et cetera. So that's how we sort of see how important and essential kind of knowing thyself really is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Betsy, is there anything you want to add or
Well, I'd
add to
say,
that?
the root of all this, I think, comes from the fact that we don't, we rush, we go through school and we have influences. So whether it's a Netflix series or our parents or a person next door, we're not really given the tools to know ourselves well because we're marching towards a goal. Oftentimes it's college or it's just some type of work. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what people tend to do is rather than take time to actually make a decision about their careers, is they default. And once they've defaulted once, they keep defaulting because they have needs. They want to sleep indoors. They need money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those pressures just build up. And so I think it all stems from not starting really on the right, authentic foot about ourselves. And so this gives everyone a chance to kind of reset and look at what our innate abilities are, because those are the clues that tell us, where our best opportunities are and where we're going to find satisfaction in our lives and in our jobs.
Mm-hmm. So how do we start that process? I mean, a lot of times we know I knew the things that weren't working for me.
Right?
The
That's
things,
pretty easy to
Yeah,
continually figure out.
it's a
yeah,
good start. Yeah.
yeah, like the conversations or the experiences or the type of work that is just like you can speak to those. This is why it's frustrating me, but as far as mapping out a future forward and understanding some of those aptitudes, how do we get started with that? Like, what are the questions? How do we shift our focus from here's what's frustrating me to here is where there's potential and maybe there's
Well,
things that I've overlooked that I haven't yet discovered?
I will just say what you're talking about in many cases is what we have in this country, which is an exposure gap. We have not invested the time or the resources for our schools, et cetera, to give people exposure to what their options are. And those options are changing really fast today. But our potential does not change. The
Mm-hmm.
neat things about knowing what your aptitudes are, there are actually 52 different ones, and school doesn't really dig into this.
Hey friends, I want to pause just for a moment. If you're navigating the complex and emotional process of leaving a mission-driven role, whether that's been ministry, nonprofit work, or any purpose-driven career, you're not just looking for a new job. You're wrestling with things like the personal, professional, and spiritual dynamics that come with all of this. Maybe you're asking things like, who am I outside of this role? What skills do I even have that can translate into the future? Will I ever find work that feels meaningful again? If this is resonating, download Finding Your Way to Flourishing. It's a free guide that I've put together for mission-driven leaders who find themselves in the midst of transition. This isn't just another guide, it's a thoughtfully crafted resource that's designed to help you begin processing your identity beyond the role that you're leaving. It can help you pinpoint which skills you can confidently bring into your new and next role. And it'll help you lean into your faith and find peace during the midst of this uncertainty. Not overwhelming, it's not complicated. It's just the first step to getting some clarity and moving forward. You don't have to figure this all out alone, and I'd love to walk this journey with you. This guide is completely free, and you can grab your copy today by clicking the link in the description or in the show notes. Let's start making some sense of this transition together. Okay, now back to the conversation.
The neat thing about knowing what your innate abilities are is that they stay with you for life. They are basically solidified in all of us, are stable after we finish puberty, and they don't change. And so anytime is a good time to find out what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex, you should probably just take it first though, and what aptitudes are, because I think
Yeah,
people presume they know and they don't.
yeah. Well, I think, if you had asked me when I was, I don't know, in high school, early college, what are you good at? I would have maybe just said, like, I get good grades, or like I can speak in public. I mean, I had like a few things that I sort of knew, but those aren't really, those are not aptitudes. Just because you got an A in math doesn't necessarily mean you have the aptitude for what you now know, Evan, is numerical reasoning. And so let me just kind of explain sort of the core four that we say are sort of the first things that you should really, again, take inventory of. So basically we look at, do you think more visually? Like, are you able to see objects in your mind's eye? Do you kind of like to work with tangible structures, and you can, like, picture how the IKEA desk gets put together and all the million parts get put together? That's one way of thinking. The other, the opposite, would be what we call the abstract thinkers. They're more like idea people, conceptual. They go into things like law or counseling. They love the philosophy class in college, things like this. And so that's one example of an aptitude where you have two opposites. Both are valuable. There's not like a pass, fail, good, bad, AF. It's just two different sides that would be important to know about yourself. And we actually say that one, we call that the spatial reasoning aptitude, is something you should know. It's kind of a line in the sand. It will really determine whether you'll be happiest, in something like engineering or architecture, or if you're more of like a real estate developer, right? Same kind of industry, two different roles. That's one example. Another one that we talk about a lot is how you solve problems. It's called inductive reasoning. Some people, like you, Evan, from your results, you don't need a lot of information when you're making a decision about something. You're probably pretty comfortable with like 3 clues, and then you can fill in the gaps. You can get to the bottom of something without a ton of information. You're probably really comfortable, like, being that hero in a moment of chaos. You put out the fire, kind of that kind of thing. But not everyone's like you. You probably have some friends or family members who are the opposite of that. And we call those people are fact checkers. They need to have all the information before they make a decision about something. They're the ones who say, give me a week and I'll get back to you, right? But they like to gather all of the information, check all the sources before they decide on something. So those are two big ones that we talk about, just to give you an example.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because maybe this comes from another aspect or part of my life, but I do like to find I like validation. I like to confirm that the path that I'm going to go down is validated, and so I will do a lot of research before I make decisions. So I don't know if that conflicts with what you saw in my results, or how that help that make sense to me, because to me that is always been two different things in my mind.
So my guess is when you watch like crime shows, you can guess who the bad guy is, who done it. Like you can figure it out. You can probably walk into a room and sort of easily read what's going on. You're able to, when you're making decisions, put pieces together and put information together that maybe other people are missing in the room. So you're able to connect those dots. I often say that people who think like you can boil things down to their essence and get to the root of something very quickly. So this is used in an ER, but it's also used, if you're an electrician trying to solve a problem, anthropologists, if you're a medical examiner, if you're, so there are a lot of different professions that use this. The opposite, the fact checker, we want those people to be the fact checkers during like the presidential debate. Like they're gonna say, wait a second, I pulled up all the information, I looked at all the different sources, that was a lie, so those are the fact checkers. So we need, again, both types, but different kinds of work will be rewarding to different types of people. My guess too, Evan, is that you work pretty well under pressure compared to your opposites.
Yeah, that's and I can't remember the term or the phrase that was used to describe me, but kind of coming back to that being in the middle.
The liaison.
The
Yeah,
liaison.
that's a work approach. Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking to the under the pressure, like I I was talking with a friend the other day and I was we were kind of laughing, like trying to talk about like what's your superpower. And what was coming to my mind was, well, I do seem to have this ability to kind of juggle a lot of spinning plates or context switch. Like, I
Yep.
have a normal, real job that I actually have to depend on to get paid for, but then I have this podcast. I'm also trying to write a book. I'm building a community for adventure racers with a friend that I was talking to. Like, I have a lot of interests that capture my attention. I'm not sure if that's actually a superpower or if that is kind of
That
like,
sounds like idea rate. Betsy will tell you about that. That
yes.
sounds like my
So,
idea rate.
Yeah, so again, aptitudes are, think of them as your brain's hardwiring, okay? And like Alex was explaining, there are many of these. So there are actually 52. Some people can identify colors, for instance, very quickly, and other people not so easily. Some people, hear musical notes. Those are aptitudes. But in your case, one of the aptitudes you definitely have is this rate of ideas. So one of the things we test is idea rate. It has nothing to do, Evan, with the quality of your ideas. They all may be terrible, frankly.
exactly.
I doubt it, but
I doubt
we're
it.
just measuring the rate at which they come to you. And so for some people, it's like they've taken the top off the blender. And in your case, that would be it, like tons of ideas just flowing. I mean, at night, you might need to meditate to try to calm it down. In fact, who knows? But that idea rate is great if you're in journalism, you're a podcast host, improv, marketing, and sales, for instance. Definitely take advantage of that. Writing. You don't want your surgeon or your pilot to have it. Okay. So that would be the other end of this continuum of the measurement. And so they're both good. It's not bad wherever you fall on the continuum of each of these aptitudes, but knowing where you fall is a huge lead to where you're going to find the most satisfaction in work. Now, in your case, you're managing that high idea rate by having lots of projects going at once. That's exactly where you're going to be the most effective and happiest doing something like that. Now, there always are challenges with everywhere and every aptitude and where you fall. So for people with high idea rate, sometimes implementing the idea or choosing the idea can be harder. So
Yes.
you maybe have faced times in your life where you're like, let projects kind of die on the vine because something else is more appealing to you. And you maybe feel this sense of, oh, maybe I've let myself down. That's not true. Okay. It's just you have so many ideas you're being demanded to choose from. And so the fact that you even have this podcast going tells me you're being pretty successful at managing those. So don't be afraid of the fact that you may have new shiny objects constantly in your life. That's just how you're hardwired. So again, knowing what our aptitudes are isn't like, oh, I'm just that way. I just can't help it. It's, oh, this is information that I have that I need to manage, whether it's in my work environment with a team or in my personal life. And so that's what maturity and wisdom bring us.
You know,
Does that help
yeah,
to describe that? Yeah.
yes, it does. Thank you for that. Because I'm also thinking about early on in my life, early on in my career. And I'm also thinking about the individual that was maybe in a similar place as me, where how possible is it for environments or influences or voices to dampen that to where the only way that some of that is going to be brought to light is for you to literally be removed from that context? How does someone like have someone flipping the light switch for them to see like, wait a second, there's a different way that you can look at yourself and your strengths, and they might coast through their whole life and never have any of that be brought to light. Like, how do
In other
we,
words, it's hidden. You're
yes,
hidden.
how do we bring that? How does an individual surface that? Or are there signs, indicators, things that they might be experiencing that could be a trigger for them to, hey, maybe you should start exploring this?
Well, let me let's back up for a second. Do you have a pencil?
Yes.
Okay. I think this
Hmm.
will be the clearest way to understand the signs. Okay. And it's all about, we sort of deep down know our aptitudes oftentimes. They shouldn't come as a surprise, but do this. Write your name. Okay.
Okay.
Now switch hands and write
Okay.
your name again. Okay. How did that feel?
Not good. Very like clunky, disjointed, messy,
Slow,
slow.
like an uphill battle.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. That's when you're in a situation at work or whatever it is where compared to another situation where you feel in your flow, if it's feeling like an uphill battle, you're probably not using your aptitudes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so aptitudes are just like this. You could get better writing your name, Evan, with your opposite hand. If you had to do it the rest of the day, even, you'd get better. But you're never going to be a calligrapher if you had to do that. Okay. So what we want to do is steer people towards understanding where their natural abilities are. And then you apply practice and learning there, and you get better and better, faster and faster than someone who doesn't have that particular aptitude. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in your
And it doesn't mean you'll never have to do hard. It's like you'll never have to. It's not that you won't have to do hard things with your dominant hand. Like you're gonna do amazing things with that. But at least you're starting with the dominant hand, and that's what with aptitudes. If you put them first, you can really just catapult forward
right.
into any activity.
So recognizing when you're in a situation at work or on a team where you feel thwarted or, tired all the time, burnt out, those are the times where you want to step back and examine sort of what are the tasks I'm doing and do they fit into my aptitudes or are they things that I'm just forcing myself to do? And again, back to what Alex said, sometimes we have to do things that are not natural and easy for us, but let's not try to do that the majority of the time.
Mm-hmm. So how do we use our aptitudes? Yeah, because I'm thinking of pivoting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times starting over is scary. I started over in so many ways after 18 years in the same work. I started over at the age of 38. It can be scary.
Yeah.
How do people use their aptitudes to overcome some of that fear? Is that possible to use your aptitudes to? And as I guess maybe a follow-up or secondary question is, what if your aptitudes don't naturally lean towards pivoting? Like some people maybe have less fear around pivoting. What if your aptitudes don't lean towards making a pivot?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to answer that first part or that last part first.
Okay.
I remember I gave this assessment to my cousin. She was working as a respiratory therapist and she was really unhappy in the work. This was before COVID, very unhappy. So she said, Alex, I'd love to take this assessment. I think I should change careers. And I gave her the assessment. I saw the results and I was almost afraid to show her because her basically perfect match was working in respiratory therapy. I mean, there were other things too. You never just have one match, but it was really a great match for her, not just her aptitudes, but also her work approach, which you tested as well, and her interests, honestly. And I said, okay, what's going on here? And what is it that you don't like about your work? And she said, okay, well, what I really hate is that I have to do all these home visits. At the time, before COVID, she was doing home visits. And she said, it's just exhausting. So we didn't, we kind of ended the conversation. We didn't really do much with that. But then during COVID, we were talking and I said, how's your work going? And she said, oh my gosh, it's transformed. I totally love it. Now I'm working in a clinical setting. It's fast paced. I'm working honestly with younger people, unfortunately, who've been affected by COVID and have respiratory problems because of COVID. But the work suddenly took on this new meaning and this new importance and relevance. And her work environment changed. But the work she was doing did not change. It was just the environment and the context. So before you throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think those contextual elements are important to look at. Because maybe it's, as Betsy loves to say, don't put your job on the witness stand prematurely. It might not actually be the culprit. But yeah, in terms of knowing when to shift and how to use your talents to pivot, I'll let Betsy take that one.
Well, I think that's what, I took this assessment when I was 33. And I think women, frankly, Evan, really understand this, who maybe have stayed home with their children. That's a perfect example, but there are many. But for me, I didn't really know what I was going to do next. And I didn't really have the confidence. And so when I took the assessment and it was laid out for me on a beautiful array of all these aptitudes that I could take advantage of and start learning and applying knowledge to, and the confidence that those things would be easy for me, that was like the kickstart for me to, get back into a different type of job. So I ended up actually working for a hedge fund for 9 years, and then into financial services and marketing, and I really love it. But whether I'm at a hedge fund or in financial services in some way, or a nonprofit, my skill is marketing, sales, writing, that type of thing, which ties back to my aptitudes. So I think my fear of switching jobs, if you will, was much allayed by, okay, I've got this skill set that I can keep developing. And let's talk about the future of work right now. We can't align ourselves to a type of job necessarily anymore. So it's wonderful you do this podcast, because I think the truth is everyone is facing this kind of crisis. Okay. And as a minister, that the word crisis means a change for the worst, but also could be a change for the better based on the Greek term. And I prefer the Greek term of it could be the better. And so anyway, knowing what your skills can be based on your aptitudes, you're much more confident in facing a very uncertain job future.
Yep, you're exactly right. When I was considering making a switch, I knew there were things that weren't working for me, like both personally and professionally. And so one of the tools that I turned to at the time was the Enneagram. And as that gave me voice, understanding, language to describe some of the things that I always sensed or felt but hadn't been able to articulate, and it began to uncover some of the motivations that were driving to me, started to give me words to be able to articulate my actual skills, which gave me tremendous amounts of confidence of knowing which direction to pivot in. And, I've had other guests on. I'm actually talking to another Hunter Mobley, another Enneagram teacher.
Yes,
Yeah,
I love
so
him.
I'm talking to him soon, but so I'm a big fan of the Enneagram. How do you distinguish between the Enneagram and the aptitudes assessment?
Well,
Alex,
I'm a big fan of the Enneagram also. Really, any similar to what you said, Evan. I mean, give me an assessment. I'm a fan. Any tool to help us kind of take a look inward, and then I think the next step is then have more empathy outward, right? So I see the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs as wonderful tools to understand our interpersonal skills, sort of how we navigate the world and interact with people, and have navigate relationships and all of that. And I think that's one really essential layer to self-awareness. And then I think the other layer is understanding our aptitudes. And so the aptitudes are the only way they can really be assessed accurately is through an objective, sort of science-backed assessment. That it's not an aptitude assessment if it's not timed, by the way, and if it's self-report. So the assessment that you took consisted of a series of brain games, we call them, and they're timed because we are trying to kind of stress test you to see what bubbles up naturally. What are the talents that bubble up naturally when you're under pressure? That's an aptitude, and that's what we want to recognize and pay attention to and respond to. But that's not to say that your interpersonal approach is any more or less important. I think it's a really essential layer on the journey to self-awareness. Just like, doing an interest survey. Interest can change over time, but it's important at any stage of life to take stock of your interests, what you sort of respond to and what resonates. But I definitely, when I'm, I think it also depends on age. When I'm talking to younger people, young adults, I definitely say, spend a little more time entertaining the aptitude career matches that you get after you take the assessment that's included in our book. Because those are probably the careers you're less familiar with, because you wouldn't self-report as being interested in those, so it
Mm,
takes some time to investigate.
mhm,
Um, and so I think that's an important thing to remember, like when you're taking this and what your exposure gap might be as
mhm.
a young adult versus someone who's later in their career.
Yeah, Betsy, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I just would say it's a layer. Enneagram is really focused on your personality.
Mhm.
Aptitudes are a whole different set of things. And
Yeah.
so they each work independently and they're both important. But you should never map a job to your Enneagram.
Mm,
Okay. They're not going to
Right.
make career suggestions for you. And they don't. They talk really, again, about how you approach your work. Aptitudes will give you concrete suggestions on what careers will be a good fit.
yeah.
And the assessment you took, as you know, took 87 minutes
Yeah.
and I'm sure felt frustrating at times. I mean, this assessment was like $750 to take it.
Mm,
Been around since the 1920s. By bringing it into an online environment and giving it to everyone, which is what the book does, for free, uh, it opens up an entire platform for your career. And I think that's the real difference here.
yeah, I love the accessibility and the exposure. I love that term. I don't know if that's a term that you guys are leaning into or have coined, exposure gap, but
Yeah.
that is a real problem, and I love that you guys are speaking to that and bringing that to light,
Yeah.
because I was sharing with you guys a little bit of my story, but when I was young, graduating high school, didn't think I had a lot of options. You kind of put yourself in a box, and you never, there was a town that I pastored in, and it was a small town. Like I'm kind of relating it to this, like
Mhm.
7,000 people, very small town. Nearest bigger cities were an hour in either direction. And I was talking to somebody that was looking for a job, and he basically felt like his only options were some other similar type role in a similar type building that was just in the town. I'm like, have
Mhm.
have you even heard of the internet? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there's the internet. But it's and even just beyond the internet, like the things that we think we're capable of. Like I love that you guys are helping expose people to more and more possibilities and more strengths that they actually possess and hold. So,
Well, Evan,
brilliant
we've
work.
we've assessed 3 million people
Mm,
over at U Science, and mostly high school and college, because that's who have the biggest need to kind of get that confidence level. The book is the same exact assessment, really speaking to you, Evan, to me, any adult from ages 17 to 77.
mhm, mhm.
But the fact that it maps to this career database gives that extra confidence and encouragement to people. And we've watched on film whole groups of people taking the assessment and getting their results. And literally you'll see them click, to see what their job options, suggested are. And the whole room lifts up like this, like, I could,
Mhm.
and that is just, really a mission and
Yes.
a mission accomplished to be able to give people that
Mhm.
new view of what their options are and half the things that are suggested, I've never heard of. What's a mechatronics engineer? I don't know, but
Oh,
it
yeah.
tells you what that is in depth on the platform, which is exciting. And, not everything requires college at all. That's the other thing we really focus on. Even if you're a stay-at-home mom coming back into the workforce, you'll find things in there that might require a new certification or a 6 months degree at a community college that will pay you well, so that's exciting.
I love it. It's like you're giving you're giving them wings. You're empowering them,
I
and
like that.
I love that's one of my things that kind of stirs in my heart. The purpose behind this podcast and the conversations that I'm having is, man, I know what it's like to feel stuck, and I want to give people a vision and a belief that there is so much more potential that resides in you, And to your guys' language, you just need some exposure to what that might be.
And the confidence. And because you can't game this assessment, you're gonna take it seriously when you get your results
Yep.
because you didn't create your results. I mean, you have to put something in, take the assessment, and it doesn't lie.
Hmm.
It's like an MRI. And I think once you see those talents and you believe in them, then it becomes this invitation to go
Mm,
explore. And I think a
yes.
lot of us are really waiting to be invited to
Mm,
go do something different, try something new.
I
So
love
that's
that.
what
I
I hear a
love
lot.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't we all want to be picked for the team?
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
for dodgeball.
It's pretty basic, though, that need. And,
Yeah.
again, the other thing I see is so many people come back to like, well, I didn't major in this. I'll hear 45-year-old people, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Mhm.
That was 25 years ago. It's
Yeah.
okay. Think of all
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
learning you've had since. You're
Absolutely.
much greater than you maybe are giving yourself credit for. You for
Yeah.
sure are greater than you're giving yourself credit for. But we have these mental blocks based on
Mhm.
messages we've received from all over the place
Mhm.
that are really silly. So this is a restart.
Yeah, I actually, that was one question I wanted to ask you guys. I have two more questions for you. Uh,
Okay.
to what you were just speaking of, not valuing our strengths or ignoring those aptitudes.
We're
If
discounting them. That's
wh
what
Yeah.
people do.
Why do we discount our strengths and how do we start honoring them?
Because they come easy to us.
Mm,
All the time, people will take this assessment and they'll say to me, "Oh, that part, oh, that was easy. That's easy for everybody, isn't it?" And I'll say, "No."
mm,
And so we discount so many of our strengths and natural abilities exactly because they come so easily to us. And so we assume it's the same for everyone when it's not.
mm,
And that's the hardest thing for people to sit down and really celebrate these things that are easy and make them feel like it's like butter, right? It just makes them feel like they're in the flow,
mm,
like they're writing with their dominant hand,
There you
right?
go. Well, and I think any parent knows this. I don't know how many of your listeners are parents, but I'm sure quite a few. If you have two children and you see them, they're different,
mhm,
right? Just like all of us are. And we tend as parents to honor the things that are and celebrate the things that are different about each child. So why aren't we doing that about ourselves?
mhm, mhm,
So, I always say this is about empathy and it's
mhm,
about love.
mhm,
And it's about loving yourself and not looking at other people as a flawed version of us.
mhm,
Okay. And we tend to do that too.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
again, letting go of the things that are an uphill battle, grasping on and really leaning into the things that come naturally and easily.
mhm.
It's a simple concept, but it's not one that people really should. Don't, people need to remind themselves of that, and this will help.
Absolutely, it will help. Last question for both of you, and whoever wants to take it first, feel free. But what does flourishing mean to you nowadays?
Should I go first? I
Sure.
have an idea. That's a great question. I think, just speaking personally, there are a lot of forces that have me feeling a little down just about the future of work and the unpredictability of it. And so to me, flourishing is to look at uh, changing technology, changing, whether it's politics, the economy, whatever's going on that makes us feel a little bit untethered and out of control, um, to remember that we have gifts that are always relevant
Mhm,
and can always be applied in interesting, unique ways. And as soon as we know what they are, I always say, hurry up and find out what they are so you can start using them, because I really believe they're like this healing balm or this medicine
mhm,
to the world.
mhm, mhm,
So I think if you can do that, you're going to flourish.
mhm. I love that.
Yeah, and to me, it's try something new almost every day, whether it's driving home a little bit different route or, listening to a different type of music, reading a different section of the paper, exposing myself to the huge smorgasbord that is the world,
Mm,
and is really what flourishing means to me.
mm. I love that. Thank you both for sharing. Where can people learn more about each of you, find more about the work that you're doing? Betsy, would you like to share first?
Sure. So the website you go to is yourhiddengenius.com. And there you can order the book. It's also available on every Amazon or anywhere else you'd want to purchase it. And the key thing, just for your listeners to know, is on the back of the book is a sticker, and beneath that sticker is a code.
Mm-hmm.
And through that website, you can go online and actually experience this aptitude assessment yourself. And then it'll open up a huge possibility of different jobs you should consider, different ways you can bring yourself to work that you already have. Ways you can be a better leader, a better team member, a better parent, better friend. So all of that is available through the website, yourhiddengenius.com.
Thank you, Betsy. Alex?
Yeah, Betsy and I are both on LinkedIn also, and I write on Substack under the Through Line.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I will link to all of that in the show notes. Betsy and Alex, thank you for being on the In-Between. I valued this conversation. I value the work that you're doing. And yes, if you're hearing this, go check out the book, take the assessment. Well worth it. And both of you, thanks again.
Thanks
so much, Evan. Thanks for the conversation. Take care.